It's been 11 years since the first volume of Classroom Elite was released, and despite for anime seasons and the community that keeps growing every day, Classroom Elite has a lot of problems and issues in its core story. Despite its popularity, you will probably never see someone claiming that this series is the best of all time, even if it's only in its own genre. There are probably many reasons for someone to not take a liking to this series, but for me, there are at least 5 big reasons why Classroom Elite will never become my favorite series of all time. So, let's take a look at it one by one. Despite the interesting concept and characters, one of the biggest flaws that the Classroom Elite have is how they decide to build the story in the first volume. It took half of the volume before they finally revealed the real conflict, and before the reveal happened, the first half of the volume was just Ayanokoji trying to make a friend, and what a bitch Horikita was. You can call it a slow burn story, and honestly, it's not going to be a problem as long as the wait pays off. But after such a big reveal about the competition for Class A, and what a bunch of defect Class D are, the solution that they came up with is nothing more than a study group. Honestly, it's kind of anticlimactic that their biggest problem was how to pass the midterm exam, and the best solution they could come up with was to buy an old exam paper from upperclassmen. It's interesting if you look at it from the system perspective, but passing the exam through a semi-cheating way somehow confirms that Class D is an actual defective product. Don't get me wrong, I do think buying the exam point with a private point was interesting, but honestly, it doesn't really give a sense of climax that is worth the wait. Volume 2 gives quite an improvement by introducing the conflict from the start, and the fake security camera was also an interesting idea, but the lack of Ayanokoji's action as the main character is really bugging me. I can say Volume 2 already provides a decent enough story for the readers, but the real conflict of Classroom Elite only started in Volume 3 with the special exam on the deserted island. Not only did we finally get Ayanokoji in real action, but it also expanded the scale to the 4 classes. Volume 3 was truly a payoff after the setup from Volumes 1 and 2, but it indeed took a long time before the story became that good. I am sure a lot of people decide to drop this series just because the first 2 volumes were not satisfying enough, but at least the anime kind of makes up for this weakness. The most interesting concept that Volume 1 has to offer is the fact that in this school, everything could be bought. That single line from Chabashira gives a lot of weight toward the private point utility, and needless to say, that one secret system manages to save Pseudo at the end. However, this system somehow completely vanishes from the story right after the first volume. The private point was still used as a currency, but we no longer saw the students experimenting on how far they could bend the school rules using their private point. It turns out that the everything could be bought system is just a gimmick, because other than transferring class using 20 million private points, the private points don't seem to have any special use that is worth talking about. Later in Volume 7's second year arc, Chabashira finally explains that even though she said everything could be bought with points, it turns out the things that could be bought are just the things that are allowed by the school, such as buying the test points. If the school doesn't allow it, then no matter how many private points the students gather, they will never get what they want, which means not everything could be bought with money. As for why this is a disappointment, buying something with private points was originally a really interesting concept, because it led you to think of endless possibilities such as creating another class, or even forcefully expelling someone like what you usually read on Classroom Elite fanfic. But since this system literally vanished from the story, those possibilities never get explored. Other than the private point, the way the school created the 4-class battle also doesn't make any sense. For starters, the way they chose their students and placed them in 4 classes literally tells you that they never expected an equal fight. Just imagine the other classes have Ryuen and Sakayanagi, while the best student in Class D is just Yamochi, and yet they keep calling it the 4-class battle. You probably already noticed that the balance between the 4 classes is nothing more than a joke, and the generation above Ayanokoji already proved it. For example, Class D from Nagumo's generation cannot even gather 100 class points when graduation arrives, and even Class D from Manabu's generation can only survive by the free food in the cafeteria. Ayanokoji's generation is just an exception, but the way the school is currently run makes it impossible for Class D to even reach Class C. Not only are they way inferior in terms of student quality, but the loss of class points in the first month will break their spirit, and it will eventually become impossible to unite. The question is, if there was never a case where Class D managed to rise, then it just doesn't make sense why this kind of system is still implemented. The competition clearly favors Class A so much, so if Ayanokoji never does anything to help the class, they will end up as a punching bag in Ryuen's mercy. However, the existence of Ayanokoji doesn't bring a balance for the four classes, but completely tips it to the other side. If we talk about Ayanokoji, then you probably already realize that no one ever stands on the same level as him. Even Yagami, who is the best in his generation, gets expelled without even facing him directly, so it's already some kind of common knowledge that Ayanokoji will always win, and even if he loses, it's also part of his plan. The problem is, if no one ever came close to him in terms of ability, that means Ayanokoji could practically do whatever he wanted, and no one could even stop him from doing so. The problem with this kind of scenario is that the story will become so predictable and boring, and if Ayanokoji is simply too strong for the story but the writer needs him to lose, sometimes the most stupid reason will come up as an answer. We have seen Ayanokoji lose because he's falling in love, and we have seen him pretend to be sick so he wouldn't destroy the sport festival. This kind of trick is needed to limit Ayanokoji's power in the story, but as you can see, not everyone could be satisfied with that kind of action. Ayanokoji is strong, but the current narrative needs him to lose, so let's just prepare ourselves for the future where Horikita will awaken her potential and defeat him, or Ayanokoji will suddenly awaken his humanity and die with a smile. Of course it's just a joke, but I do hope it will always remain as a joke. The biggest and most logical reason to criticize Classroom Elite is how they treated their characters. It didn't really show up in the beginning, but the way Manabu leaves the school without any impactful action doesn't really sit well with how much this guy gets glazed by Ayanokoji. After that, this problem starts to become worse. With the new first year's character showed up and the uninhabited island exam, it's become clear that this series cannot handle too many high IQ characters, so they start to vanish and become irrelevant. We already see Hosen completely become irrelevant in the story, Yagami getting expelled with no effort, and Nagumo kept waiting in the back seat until finally getting a treatment that was no better than Yagami's. These characters were hyped up so much and said to have an immense amount of potential, but in the end, Ayanokoji was the only one who actually mattered. They are wasted potential, but the word potential itself has already become some kind of curse that Ayanokoji kept using to hype up a character. Ayanokoji falling in love with potential, with something that he cannot see, and that is exactly why we cannot really grasp what he actually sees in Horikita and the others, because there is a chance what he saw never existed to begin with. I am sure some people believe it would be better if the story focused on Koenji or Ishigami, and yet Ayanokoji didn't really care about them. He kept pushing Horikita forward, and sometimes did questionable things just for the sake of making Horikita stronger. No matter if you like it or not, that is just how Ayanokoji's presence moves the story. He doesn't need to get serious, and doesn't need to care about potential threats like Ishigami, because even if they start targeting him, he could just remove him in an instant like what he did with Yagami. As a result, instead of an epic fight between the T-Rexes, all we got recently is just Ayanokoji expelling Shinohara to keep Horikita motivated. Of course the epic part should be saved for later, but this plot revolving around Horikita's potential and the four-class battle has been dragged on for so long that it starts to become boring. So, let's just hope the potential that Ayanokoji looking for actually exists, and is not just a simple power of friendship.